Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us for another episode of Digital Success Dialogue. I'm going to avoid good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because we have various people joining from various parts of the world. Today, we're going to have a very interesting discussion about how Fintech, open banking is going to evolve. We have with us Mr. Bruno Macedo. Just to give you a small little context about Bruno, Bruno is an experienced manager, researcher, and a fintech expert with a demonstrated experience leading digital process, IT transformation, and human augmentation across a range of sectors, including fintech, banking, cybersecurity, government, and education. He has more than 20 years of experience of leading digital departments, business units, and shared service centers. He's joining us from the beautiful country, Netherlands. Thanks a lot, Bruno, for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Shall I start?
Awesome. Just give me a minute. I will quickly play a small little video introducing you in case people have, because you have a long bio, and then we will leave it to you and open the floor for you.
Go ahead.
So guys, Bruno is going to help us really understand what this terminology Phygitalization is, how it's making an impact on fintech and open banking. So here's to Bruno's and his interesting walkthrough to the whole presentation.
Thank you so much, again. Thank you, everyone, for this little bit, and I hope I can get you as excited as I am with talking about this industry. It's always very interesting how we talk about fintech these days. 10 years ago or 15 years ago, talking about banking was not that exciting, and these days it's something that always gets everyone interested and everyone can contribute. So I was already introduced. Thank you so much for that small introduction. I hope that I can talk a little bit with you guys about Phygital, this new reality that combines the digital and the physical in one, and the impact for the fintech industry and also for the banking industry. Let's start quickly about me. So as I was introduced, I'm a speaker, an advisor. I also lecture about this, and I like to think of myself as an outside thinker. So therefore, I always like to talk with everyone and trade ideas and comments, and so that I can bring it into the industry. Feel free to reach out in any given time. I'm always open to trade some comments, ideas, and to talk about this. So let's start with saying the world has changed. 20 years ago, if we would look at the banking industry, it would be something like navigating in a calm, known weather with a ship. If your bank was a ship, you would probably be able to plan 3 years ahead and know what was going to happen in the market with the interest rates, so on and so forth. There would be some ways, but in a sense, you would know more or less what happens, and you could plan it in advance. With the whole financial crisis and with the fintech revolution and things that have been happening, now it's really hard to do those plannings with such an extended long time. You will then need an experienced career, and you need also that chip and those instruments, at least, that can bear you to the right place. And it's very important that you have the right team to support you and you can react. That's the same in the financial industry. The industry itself broke, and you now have more than 12,000 fintechs, and what used to be internal departments in the bank, like the legal department or the payments department or the pensions department, now are completely new industries with competitors, with market entries. So it's not easy for incumbent banks to keep being at the top of what they were in the market, but also it's not easy for new entrants in the market to compete. For us, people that are interested in technology and fintech, it's super exciting because we get new things every day. And if you notice, what used to be something like wealth management, now it's wealth tech. Bank managing and banking is bank tech. Everything is tech. So we're mixing all this. Why? Because the whole structure, the whole economic and social structure has been changing to that. Unfortunately, there was already this need to change and to be more digital and to be more ready to these new challenges. We got the whole pandemic that made it even worse. So if we had already what I used to call the perfect storm with different areas and industries for merging into banking and creating new industries and new challenges, now we have like an additional tornado on top of that perfect storm. We have a health crisis, we have an economic crisis, we have to think about how we're going to do remote work. We have to think about how client empathy will react to the fact that they're not going to walk into our bank or companies anymore. So imagine all this, the perfect storm already from the revolution and the financial crisis and new technology hurdles, plus expectations and quick changes that have been happening now with the pandemic. So if we had the need to change and to be more digital before, now it's even faster, the requirement, and even faster the urgency to adapt our banks and companies to that. As I said, so the world has been changing, the pandemic also changed, and the fact is that consumers and customers now are used to services that they've been pampered with, like with the big techs, where everything is super, super fast and immersive, and they need quick responses, and they need to get answers quickly and personally, and they need to be immersed and empowered. And we'll get there in a second. So how are fintechs and fintech holding the storm in the middle of all this? Well, I like to believe that the way to hold up to that storm is through cognition, and you have to go even beyond just a simple digitization on your processes. If you look at some statistics that corroborate all this idea, 84% of for example, of banking customers in US still visit their local branch. So that means there's a physical connection, but at the same time, millennials would consider banking with Google, for example, and drop their current bank and also adopt something from Apple. So that means you start to have this combination of two worlds where people still like to go onto the branch to do their very important and high banking service-heavy requirements or services, but at the same time, they feel comfortable with going online and banking with technology companies and leave a little bit the financial and banking brand behind. So the world is really changing into this mix, hybrid, physical and digital. That's why we call it phygital. There's a lot of experiences. Marketing has been approaching this for a while already. And how did this go? So how is this happening? Let me give you a quick look. Well, as I said, phygital is basically the magic between the two worlds, between the being able to walk into a branch and being served, or into a store and being served at the store, but have the same experience if I pick up the phone and I want to, or my smartphone, and I want to order the same service or product on my phone. The journey started basically from before the 90s, but where we had like the physical experience, where we knew the bank advisor, we had one sales channel, we would walk into the bank, do our deposits, credits, take care of our loan. Then after the 2000s, we started to have some services and a lot of services expanding in banking portals, web portals, and online services on our phones. But the majority of those were different channels, even in social media. So there's a moment where companies and banks have been growing into different channels, but there's still the need, or there was still the need, to combine all those into an immersive experience. And that's basically what we're trying to get with Phygital. It's a holistic view of the customer, where all channels are available and connected and provide you with the same experience, not only for the customer, but also for the bank. And you have to remember that banks have been sleeping for years, and pardon the word sleeping, is like they've been hanging over huge amounts of data and huge amounts of interesting information that they haven't used it fully. And now they're waking up to that. And studies and people around the industry know that if you actually are able to consolidate all those channels and make sure that data and experience is used, then you can actually move the frontier of return on investments and move the frontier of returns actually further with increased market share, lower cost income ratio, and improved risk profile. Basically, what we're saying is, if you look at the customers that you have, if you explore the information and the way you behave with the customers, if you provide them a better experience, you can actually take much more out of the whole relationship with your customer. I'm not going to go into details, but just to tell you, to actually move into Phygital is not a question of just deciding to go there. You don't go Phygital in a couple of weeks, or just because you decide to go there. It actually entails a set of steps and processes that start from becoming a little bit more agile to be able to respond to more immediate challenges, as I started in the whole presentation with that team in the boat that was shaking a lot, but also making sure that your infrastructure, besides the whole technical approach on it, does respond to layers of information and data, that you can gather it, can store it, and analyze it, that you have an intelligent infrastructure layer that can actually get that data and provide you with some advice and forecast, that your products and execution and security around that are all interconnected and respond to it. So I have some really important information, I know how to handle it securely, and I know how to act, predict, and make my products and services be better. And also on the feedback layers, provide ways to actually get the feedback out of each interaction at each moment and in each channel in a holistic view. So this is not simple, and that's why you need to approach it in a planned, and most of the times, and I'll get to there, with some partners. How do we go for it? Well, the first approach is, Syed, go ahead.
Yeah, Bruno. I would actually want to spend a little more time on the last architecture that you had mentioned,
Go ahead.
which you have in the last slide, and actually want for the viewers, everyone joining in, to actually give an understanding of how exactly you mentioned about being agile. You mentioned about how to adapt and take those feedbacks continuously when we are trying to actually move to the digital. Now, give us some examples or something that you had an experience working for people both who have been in the legacy system for a good amount of time and people who are starting it fresh. How did actually that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So the architecture that you see here is more for managers. So it's more the perspective on how to use the data. But if you would do a transversal architecture layer, for most of your colleagues that are more, well, the techies, they would probably understand it as in the very low end, you would have probably a data warehouse instead of the normal SQL reporting system. So basically, most banks have, for example, transactions and a set of transactions with values, with patterns on the transactions, with information about the time when the transaction occurred, the medium and the average, and the type of consumers, and what do they buy. Now imagine that I walk in your bank, and that's the example I wanted to give you, and I tell you, okay, you already have that information. You just need your customers to allow you to use it to provide some intelligent response. And let's imagine that I allow my bank to do that, and then I'm thinking on having a baby, and my bank notices that I'm buying baby clothing and I'm buying a bigger car, and then okay, the bank goes, he's having a baby. It looks like he's preparing to have a baby, and in my phone, I get a response saying, Bruno, by the way, if we noticed that you're buying baby stuff, we have a special loan for a bigger house, or you could actually save on your insurance, because the API is behind the whole bank, and their partners are actually telling the partners, look, there's this person with this household, and this is the structure. Do you have a better insurance for him, for example? And the insurance company can actually say, yes, you can offer him a better insurance. This is what we call invisible banking. And to get there, it's hard with legacy systems because they don't have the data warehouse capacity or the cloud capacity or the competitive and business intelligence capacity to provide you those forecasts. And looking at the infrastructure, for example, if you see information and data where you have the data warehouse, advanced analytics systems, and big data systems, that's just a way to gather and prepare your data. Then you would get, for example, cognitive tools from cloud services to tell you where exactly would you get, or an advanced monitoring platform that would tell you, oh, wait, Bruno is actually not having any baby because he's not even married, so this is awkward, or he's not even together with anyone. This might be fraud or something like that. You can actually trigger something. Let's imagine if you have that data, you have to connect it to your products. So you can't
Mm-hmm.
wait. If you have a decision that says, look, we need to be able to create a product on our bank, a special loan for people this way, you can't wait then after 1 year or something to create a product. You need the infrastructure, the software to be able to create a special loan with a special rate,
Okay.
mostly on the fly with some 4 eyes principle, 6 eyes principle, but it needs to be flexible. It needs to act in an agile way. Also, the interaction. So if Bruno responds on the app or on social media, or if he complains that the loan is not as good or something like that, you need
Mm-hmm.
also the capacity to respond to it.
Okay.
Sometimes it would be another interesting meeting. Sometimes we talk about how software itself and the development of software needs to be ready to do this type of recycling and quickly adapt to these challenges. I hope that's okay. I answered
Yeah.
it.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, so basically, as a client, as I told you, I want my app and my bank to respond to me in a cognitive way. Basically, I want my app to respond like if it was somebody that I would be talking at the bank. If I would be talking with my advisor, I want the app to more or less act in the same way, telling me, look, you have a special loan, as I said, or you can just lower your costs, put new windows on your house and save some money, something like that. Um, and this implies something that goes then into the whole world of services behind it. How can banks, besides the architecture, implement all this? There's a huge amount of technologies and services and possibilities that we can take advantage of, and those rely on the same amount or the same size as I told you for the increasing number of industries and the increasing number of fintech related industries that we can use. We can go from artificial intelligence to a localized based social network industry. This is a whole universe that we can explore with partners and colleagues. What's important is that not only you prepare your bank and your company to respond to that, but also you understand that you're providing the customer, the consumer, what he's been looking for in the financial industry that he already has from the big techs, which is basically the fact that you know me, so you don't ask me questions about something that you should know based on my information. Don't tell me to put my pay slip if you know, if you get my salary on my bank account. You're engaging. You ask me if I like this or if I'm interested in that, and you actually listen to what I have to say back, so you hear me. You empower me. I can take a decision to make a loan and how much do I want it in how much times, or an investment on my phone and my solution that you provide me on that channel. And at the very end, I get delighted because it's not just a one-to-one, very stuck in obscure relationship. It's a relationship that even the language in these days, it's really different and more personal. So this is just to give you an idea that it's not something simple that you do overnight. It does require a little bit. You can't do this alone. It's not easy. Even if you're a big bank, it does require for you to expand on your APIs, the connections that you have, and actually do some smart collaborations. There's a lot of interesting companies out there in those small niche markets that do specialized, interesting things. And if you really want to compete and have something at the very level of big techs, but also at high level of banking and finance quality service, you really need to search for nice collaborations and have your colleagues. So what is the result of all this? Can I give you some examples? And with this, I hope that I'll finish up my presentation soon. The result is that online and at the branch for the banking industry, you would have a similar experience. And some banks are already doing that. So if I log in on my banking portal and I want to check for a loan and I want to talk with somebody, I must have the possibility to talk with an advisor the same way that I would have the same possibility to talk with that advisor at the branch. I also want my visual experience in the portal to be of a similar experience at the branch. If at the branch I have some section where I can talk with a person on a certain level, I want that same experience and service online. The other way around, if I get to the branch also has to understand that I can't just walk in the branch anymore and spend a whole morning to talk with somebody to take care of something that probably could take a few minutes online. The branch has to respond to that. So a lot of banks are actually starting some challenge tests, or even already implemented branches that are smart branches that actually respond to your daily necessities. Besides being a bank, they actually work with like a coffee area, a smart ATM that can respond to whatever you need. There's like a place where you can actually work. So some banks actually have sports centers for your kids. You can have a branch at the branch, and then you get a different experience, and you get more inclined to do the work there, but you don't feel like it's something completely separated from what you could do online in a different place. So, end result, all interactions are powered by a hyper-connected data across multi-platforms, and gives you this intelligent, context-aware experience where you feel that you're empowered, and with this you don't get disrupted. You actually get more advantages from working with the bank, and the bank actually gets your life easier. It's nice. So how does it look like in the real life? Well, I'm going to pass you quickly, and with this I'm going to end. In Italy, for example, Banca has started like a digital bank where you could just walk in, and with your phone, you have somebody that you can ask for questions, but with your phone, like you would do it at home or something, you get like a very automated service, which gives you a quick experience. You don't have almost a waiting time. But if you need any additional help, you can always reach for a human interaction, but you can actually take care of your business and banking services really quick. At CaixaBank, for example, they created an area where you could actually do some workshops or some IT gatherings with your colleagues, and you could just work there, even study, and even play there while you're doing some new creations, some new companies, and interact with the bank, which is something really, really, really cool and out of the ordinary. One of my favorites, Virgin Bank, actually gives you the experience to be on a plane while you are at the bank branch, and also you could have coffee and do some TV, game consoles, free Wi-Fi, newspapers. So that's literally not the typical experience that you would expect from a bank. You have really, really new type of services. For example, you have a bowling alley in the bank, and I think that's something that I would not expect in a bank at all. So it is an amazing new world. Amazon has another experience fully integrated with the bank, where you can walk in, do your grocery, walk out, and basically it's all intelligent. There's a lot of interesting technology products. It's near field. You don't even have to do most of the typical things that you would do in the supermarket. All technology empowered and all adapted to you. What am I trying to say with all this is that there's a lot in digital. There's a lot that you can gain. There's a lot that consumers are expecting from your financial services and from your industry. There's a lot of market share for banks, for software industries, and for consumers itself to gain with this. But to go digital, you need to do some big steps. One is to change your mindset. The other one is to be safe. And last but not least, let me just go back there a second. You need to set up your ecosystem and connect to other people, and rehearse those digital journeys that your customers are going to experience. I hope that this is not too much to kill you with in 20 minutes, but I just wanted to give you the idea that it's really, really an amazing industry, and it's really exciting to be working on this. Syed, I hope I didn't kill you too much with all this.
Awesome. To be honest, it was great listening to you, and I have a lot of questions to be asked, and I'm sure some people would ask it. So we will just quickly move back to, yeah, wonderful. So Bruno, to start with, I would really want to understand, and my first question primarily goes talking about the isolation economy, which I think digital is a byproduct of, and where we are currently living in, wherein we actually want everything to be done over the phone, and we actually want less to step out, keeping aside the unfortunate pandemic. But yeah, this is what our behavior was heading towards. And how do you think a bank which primarily will want to get started, who do you think he should look at? Who could be their early adopters to start with?
That's a very interesting question. So I would answer you a couple of months ago that they probably it should start with the millennials and the newer generations that are more inclined and used to work with the big techs, the ones that have been pampered by the Amazons and the Apples of this world. With the pandemic, what we saw is that older generations have been forced to, well, to start using mostly digital channels because they're not allowed to use other channels, even fiduciary money. So basically now what I would probably advise banks to do is not only test the digital journeys from some younger generations, but also reimagine how somebody older with some more difficulty in understanding the whole concept of technology would interact with it. I still get phone calls and conversations with customers from banks that say, how am I going to react to somebody that only knows how to use the phone, which is really hard. They're used to having an advisor. So I would say it's an extra hurdle, so they have to probably reimagine the whole branch in a way that it's safe for human contact, but at the same time it's more digital. So actually, it's a great question. I would say now they have to imagine both targets, both groups, but probably in different ways.
Right. We've been hearing about branchless banking, wherein we said that the branchless banking will primarily have millennials accepting the online banking, and you will still have the senior citizens coming in. So you need initially might not actually have it, but as far as I right now see that it's going to be a mix of both. People want to come sometimes, some part of it, and some still don't want to go. Primarily, my second question, which goes out to you, is keeping in mind that currently a lot of banks are becoming very cost effective. Keeping and a lot of them have a lot of NPAs in this part of the country. We had some issues regarding NPAs coming across, and that's where banks somehow sometimes struggle to become profit. A recent survey showed us that Phygital could be one of the great ways to actually open a lot more sales revenue. Anything that you particularly saw being adopted by some of the banks and they've actually made a lot of money, or they did make an impact in their overall revenue?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's this dual challenge. So there's in Europe, for example, there's GDPR about privacy and data privacy with the amount of data that is shared. That kind of constrains you for great reasons. That kind of constrains you in going further in some integration with APIs and data interchange. On the other hand, open APIs or open finance, because open banking itself, it's just limited to banking, but open finance goes across the industry. I see a lot that can be made across open finance, and that's where banks can actually get a big return on investment. I gave you the example during the presentation. So if I want to do some loan, for example, if my bank already has APIs and it's interconnected to my insurance company, to some credit or even real estate, my loan journey is basically searching the market for the best price to get a loan for a certain amount that I need for a house. And if the bank can actually help me out by using my data, and if I get an experience, because I will probably want to walk into a branch to talk about the loan, I doubt that I'll do it from my computer. If that experience can be as smart at the branch as it would be on the phone, imagine that I walk in the branch and somebody there already knows whatever he needs to know to provide me a quick, swift answer with some huge amount of safety and what he's saying in the advice. That's huge, and banks can make a lot out of it. And I'm pretty sure people, especially millennials, will definitely choose for services that make their life easier, but at the same time empower them and give them some financial knowledge in the way that otherwise they would have to spend hours in the bank.
Awesome. So if I understand correctly, is that primarily you're thinking of actually mixing a lot of financial products, and then gradually banks becomes the core of all the kind of problems or all kind of products which can be offered to this kind of guy. Yeah. So in India, primarily there's one of the largest bank which primarily is looking at coming across and becoming consolidated in terms of e-commerce. Do you think Phygital can be a great way to have that bridge between the online commerce, the banking? Currently, this sit apart. You have Amazons of the world trying to just use banking. You think the banks will become the e-commerce hub, and then you think something in that sort? Anything in that direction?
Absolutely. So imagine this. Imagine that you have, especially in India, that you have a close connection to your small merchants around your neighborhood or around your town. They know you and they trust you because they know that you do the shopping there every day. And you probably don't have any problem walking in there one day and ordering more than usual because there's a trust built over years. With some cognitive data and using the fact that you paid that you always paid your bills, that can create a lot of new businesses for your merchant. Your merchant
Okay.
trusts people in an easier way because the bank tells them, look, don't worry about it. He's actually a nice person. He keeps paying every time. Also can actually advise them to say, look, you've been opening from 9 to 5, but we noticed that most of the people just buy your product after 5 or something. So, for example, imagine the bicycle merchant that sells bicycles. And due to the bank knows from the payments transactions and then from analyzing the data that most of the people actually want to buy bicycles during a certain period of time, during a certain period of hours, and they cycle at night, for example. Then it probably doesn't make sense that you open in the morning. The bank can actually advise you to open your shop later in the evening to help them out, or on the weekends. And
Right.
there's a lot of behavioral technology that can actually help you. And from the consumer side, there's also great if you can actually participate and tell the bank, look, I'm missing an open shop that I can take my bike on the weekend because everything is closed and I actually just want to bike and do sports on the weekend. So from fraud management, from behavioral approach, from that physical to digital advice experience, there's really a lot that banks, when they are connected through data to other partners and merchants, there's really a lot that can be gained and a lot that can be made. And again,
Absolutely.
I'm never talking, but companies like yours, companies that actually do software development and consultancy, do play a big role here because you're the best ones to advise on how to build those journeys, or at least to how to analyze them. So it goes without saying that there's an important role there for software companies.
Absolutely. A lot of times, a lot of us actually do that part wherein we actually go to the market, understand what the customers are actually looking after, and then we fortunately have that liberty of going and telling that to the top brackets sitting in various banks. Uh,
Exactly.
an interesting point which you mentioned right now is all about the customer experience. If I understand that, wherein you're talking about bikes, which allows people to actually help what they're doing, and then actually adopting your business model as per your consumer behavior. The second thing which often comes with customer behavior in terms of understanding them deeply is security.
Yeah.
How do you think that's going to be handled with digital? Do you have anything specifics in mind to handle that security part of in the digital?
It's one of the biggest challenges. I usually say there's like three big challenges around the whole phygital approach. One is human, and it's not easy to get somebody that knows technology and banking, the fintechers as ourselves. It's not easy. We don't have yet a long experience of universities and courses on fintech. So the second one is about regulation, and it's the legal approach, which is also hard, but definitely security is one of the biggest. We're talking about that amount of information and data that was lying on the banks, probably in the basement in some files, in a nice server, and now we want to open
Mm-hmm.
it up to be used, well, for good, for businesses and to empower people. But of
Mm-hmm.
course, we will probably use it with cloud technologies, but somebody with mean intentions has the same capacity to probably try to get that data and use it in the wrongest way possible. So it's a huge
Mm-hmm.
challenge. And with this, I don't want to say that we shouldn't do it, but you're right when you ask, okay, how to do this. Every step of the way, I would say, if possible, combine the best of the millennial experience in banks in um, due diligence when taking actions with
Mm-hmm.
the best of agile approach from the big tech. So yeah, look at the data, be open to how to pick up that data, but still use the toll gates and the security defense and the risk adverse approach that banks have. It's not easy, but then again, that's where a lot of consultancy and a lot of interaction is needed because we're talking about our financial information and our financial life, and that has a huge impact. So it cannot just be discured in a simple way. And there's a whole industry and science around it on cybersecurity for banking or vendor management with risk management for banking. So it's a really great question, Sayed.
Awesome. Coming and now we leave the fintech aside. Let's talk about a little bit about open banking. That's another area that actually is buzzing and people are talking a lot about it. I really wanted to understand one thing. Do you think the current, often people say that open banking will change the internal way of working inside the banks? If people want to enter into the open banking culture, do you think the organization structure would be a reject, which you think due to open banking becoming the primary focus of a bank tomorrow? Anything you think in the organizational part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So data will be the focus of banks. The banks will most probably be the place where we store our data and we give them, besides our financial capacity or wealth, we're going to give them the probably the access or give them the key to access to our data, and because it's going to become more and more important by day. And we need banks to adapt to that human approach in their employees, in the way that they work. You cannot continue to have a non-agile approach on how banks work and talk about open banking APIs and providing data, or in a more technical terms, do cycles of CI/CDs in 2 weeks or something like that, cost of development.
Right.
And so you need a big cultural change. And
Mhm.
that cultural change needs to somehow keep the best of the banking industry and combine it with the best of the technology industry, the best of the regulator industry, which is not easy also, and it's
Right.
super heavy for banks, and also the best of being ready for something that might come in the future. I usually tell a fintech it's a new type of professional, because it actually needs to know a little bit about technology, a little bit about banking, a little bit about regulation, but still be ready to learn something new tomorrow, because our life is changing every day, and the banks need to adapt to that reality. And that's not going to be easy, but if banks are able to provide initiatives like innovation centers, or something like challenger projects and ideas to connect to fintechs to get some information or actually help, there's a lot to gain, and there's a lot to be shifted and to make in the future. I'm imagining the bank of the future, if we can call it, in the next years. It's going to be completely different from from what we know these days, in size, in morphology, and how it works, because it really needs to shift. If we want to keep being, let's say, digitally significant, because there's other types of banks for private banking that they might still exist with other type of approaches that doesn't get that affected for now with this type of revolution.
Right. When you say you have to be digitally significant for the future, let's also a little bit touch upon the fact that how will the central banks play the role? Right now, central banks have that liberty to actually hold all the kind of regulations. They dictate it to the banks. I somehow feel that, do you think they'll become banks which will have the APIs with them, with open banking in picture? They'll regulate primarily who's going to see what, who's going to not see what. Do you think that's the structure of a central bank in future?
Yes, I allow me to make to be a little bit less serious around this. I usually tell that in a joke sense, I usually tell that central banks have been so envy of fintech, they just started to be fintechs themselves, because they didn't used to come into conferences or speak at conferences. Now you see a lot of representatives from central banks talking how they innovate and how they have open banking and open finance, which is great. But so I make fun of it in the best way possible, saying, "Hey, nice that you guys want to join us." But they're actually some of them are actually taking huge leads on that. The Brazilian central bank, it's impressive. They just started a whole new initiative for open finance, and that's leading the whole country in regulation and technology and so on, which usually would be something that you would be expecting coming from a big bank and not exactly from the regulator or the central bank. So in the European Union, there's been a mix, but it's actually taking lead again in the central banks, in not only providing the regulation, but also providing some new technology or advice in consultancy in new aspects and new ways of services. The PSD2 is a nice approach on how the central bank was involved. And I believe that soon enough, we will see central banks, as you said, and you said it well, taking a way more prominent role, not only in trying to get everything together, but also advising and being a center of advisory for how to proceed in the future, which is something really, really great to see. Of course, they have different, different engines and different speeds than we do, especially in the software industry. But it's been remarkable the effort that they're making. Let's see how it goes in the next years. But I would say it's a great partner to have next to, and also it's a great aspect of the financial life of each country to take a close look on what's going on. For example, allow me to something. For example, the sandbox experience that every country is now creating and trying to make it international.
Right.
It's an example of it.
Yeah, I was actually coming to the sandbox itself. I'm glad you picked it up. So my question to you is primarily with sandboxing, and fortunately in this part of the country also we're seeing a lot of people actually utilizing it to the fullest. Uh, Off-the-shelf product will become common, wherein people would like to understand they take one thing from one bank or they take one thing from one kind of financial provider, and then create a mix of it, which might only suit Bruno versus not might not suit someone like Syed, because it's his behavior, it's his way of
Yeah.
living lifestyle that I think is becoming common. You've seen anything of that sort being developed? Anything you've watched very closely?
Yeah, there's a lot of sandbox experiences. I always try not to speak too much about sandbox because every day there's something coming out, and I don't want to take the risk of saying something that changed yesterday. But it's impressive. So there were some sandbox initiatives in local countries for the last 10 years. Then it changed for hubs, Dubai hub or the Amsterdam hub and then the Berlin hub for some sandbox experiences. And now we see international sandbox experiences throughout hubs. So sandboxes that are actually made for companies in India, for example, to test out their software to be implemented in Europe, which is great, and you would save a lot of money as a company just to put yourself in a sandbox. But also for companies that are just starting and they just need to, just need to save some time and to creating something that is already compliant by design. Sandboxes are very important there, and governments have been playing a really great role there, helping out companies to test out their software. So every day we see new initiatives with international sandboxes. We see also new ISOs for financial schemas and so on to make things more standard. I really think it's a great initiative, and I think it's one aspect that I would advise every fintech out there, doesn't matter how in which stage, to at least take a look, because they could save them a lot of money and a lot of headaches, because you just become compliant by design, and by the time you actually apply for a license or something, most of the times the regulator already knows you and makes things so easy and so faster to be approved. So it is definitely something to take into account.
Awesome. While I was just having an understanding and you're talking about regulation, somehow a year from now, when the world was talking all about blockchain, unfortunately, we have a viewer already commenting and asking you this question. Is primarily the cryptocurrency. Where is that bubble heading? Was that really a bubble, or do you think that just that it has taken a leap in terms of implementation and is going to come back very hard soon? How do you think the world of crypto evolving in near future?
It's one of the 1 million questions. I've been working with blockchain since 2012, so it was pretty much not known yet. So it's from 2008, the paper. And in 2012, we looked at it mostly as an interesting approach for a decentralized way to work things. So basically, from identity to passports to even to currency. What I always say is that most of the initiatives that I see on cryptocurrencies have been private corporate way of private corporate experiences for crypto. So with always an interest on making profit for the company that's developing them. So it's always
Mm-hmm.
there's always a big level of volatility there, unless governments really start to adopt them per se. And here's where the things get a little bit tricky. If from one side you can see a lot of articles stating that, yeah, sure, we're going to have a cryptocurrency for Europe, and with Germany already leading in there, there's a lot in Asia starting to build up. It would give you the sense that, okay, this sounds like I can invest something on here and I can start working with it. On the other hand, there's a lot of still details that haven't been cleared out that can actually create some sense of defense. It's really a hard market to do some forecast. One of the hypothesis, for example, is that there's not a lot of people arguing about the algo from the blockchain itself, how it's calculated and how can it be break, and if it's broken, how can you actually fix it or make sure that nobody actually uses it in the wrong way. There's been some experiences and some attempts to use the chains in a more private and more obscure way than actually the whole initial idea that to make it open and known for everyone. So I would
Mm-hmm.
definitely say cryptos are here to stay. It's hard for me to imagine that they're not that they're going away, because they make life easier for a lot of people. And they're actually special, interesting for safeguarding value. There's some currents of thoughts and some current of scholars that believe that fiduciary money, if it ceases to exist, it gives too much power to central governments. So cryptos are there to safeguard some, some of your financial assets. But I dare to say, yes, they're here to stay. There's still a lot of volatility. You saw with Bitcoin these last weeks,
Right.
which actually was not the intention at all at the beginning. The intention was that it would be more stable than a normal currency, and it's not. So, if I knew the answer to that question, probably I would be rich in a couple of days. But still, they're here to stay. It's an interesting area. Technology speaking, it's really interesting. And I think and I hope that the technology of blockchains and related technologies will actually get more mature, and then we can actually use it for way more different industries and aspects.
Awesome. One thing which I actually want to actually go deep, and keeping aside, we've spoken about how exactly Phygitalization is going to evolve. One thing is the open banking. The second thing is all about innovation. Fintechs have been known for innovation. Now, I really wanted to understand if you've seen anything in particular, because last 6 odd months across the globe has been challenging for multiple industries. You might have seen someone really doing something really out of the box. Any example, anything that you would like to share with the viewers here today?
Yeah, so in innovation, and I must say that there's a lot of initiatives from big banks trying to make some challenging labs or challengers to try new technologies. I would start, before giving you the perfect example, I would start by saying always do an evaluation on vendors and the way you want to innovate. If it's a small innovation, you can do a small lab. If it's a big innovation, maybe you need some big vendor management and do some big evaluation before you actually start to take it on. This would be a whole new meeting that we could do, a whole new webinar around it. But I saw, for example, a bank that actually translated all of its processes into smart contracts and putting them into their own internal chain, which was, the result is that the costs to process anything in the bank are super low, like they're very minimum. But also the human necessity, it's also minimum. So that was strange to see a bank that say, I can work with 12 people and still serve thousands of people, because all of my processes in the bank have been put it into a smart contract and in the chain. So if trigger 1 happens, it gets processed in a way, and I can actually sell a whole corporate license in my bank for less than 60 euros a year and still make a lot of profit. To me, that was okay. Wow, regulation-wise, that probably it's amazing. Regulators will probably love it. There's no human touching it, so once it works, it's fine. But you need to understand the probably the code behind the smart contracts. On the other hand, I still don't even know the impact in the whole banking industry if we just start to make everything automatic and cognitive. But for me, that was a huge leap in innovation, probably 5-10 years ahead of our time. It's strange that I would just do something and just 10 minutes later there's an agreement, smart contract done. Okay. It's
Yes. It's actually so. One of the things that for us have been an experience working for fintech now roughly for more than a decade now has been the customer onboarding. Often a lot of the banks or insurance players or a lot of financial products, because of the regulations and everything, has been one of the areas that they are still trying to solve, is to how do you minimize customer touch points, make the onboarding experience a lot better. I think if people are actually innovating in that, then I think the innovation is gonna stay for far longer than they actually apprehend. Yeah.
If you touch, for example, open accounting, that's usually one of the biggest hurdles for small SMEs, for small and medium companies. If I want to ask for a loan to start my company, probably these days the bank will take a couple of weeks and ask me all sorts of documents, and it's super evasive for me. So it's very it gets to more questions and gets me very uncomfortable to provide the bank that amount of information and details. Probably I don't even have the time or money to start with, but I do need that loan. And so with these innovations, for example, in open accounting, I can just provide an API that the bank connects to my company, gets partial data that it's enough what they need to make an assessment of my risk and do the due diligences and then the risk assessment. And that is actually completely disruptive. I can get a loan quickly if the bank has access to that information in probably an hour or 5 minutes, versus having to provide paperwork and so on and walking into the bank and talking to an advisor. I can imagine that for the short, medium range, when these things start to really become in practice, it's going to have a huge impact in the banking industry. It's going to be tremendous.
Absolutely. So, Bruno, for a couple of minutes, I'm going to give you a very interesting part. I'm going to make you the banking king of the world, and I'm going to ask you this question: Is that what's the one thing that you're going to undo in the banking industry, and why? What one thing you really hate, and or you do not want? Actually, hate is a bad word, but something that you would want to revisit and do, press the undo
Yeah.
button.
Okay, I've been an immigrant, so I've been around the world, and one of the things that always bothers me is that there's no, and you pointed out there, when I'm onboarding, there's always this due diligence that it doesn't matter if I go from the Netherlands to Germany, which is right next door, it looks like I'm going into a completely new world, and I need to go and undergo this huge process to get a bank account. I need a house to get a bank account, but I need a bank account to get a house, and so on and so forth in each new country. But once I have that bank account, if I leave the country, there's no problem. So it's like it's a huge hurdle to get in, but then it's you can just stay. Even if you leave the country, you can just stay there. So I would say one of the things that I would probably undo in the banking industry, or at least change it, is the way you actually do due diligence. Banks know each other. It's not like they haven't talked with each other, and governments know each other. So it would be really good if they could just make things a little bit more easier, especially in big spaces like Europe or India or so on, where you could actually open a bank account without having to, I don't know, provide a huge amount of data that is probably unnecessary due to the risk also of what you're doing. Maybe they could just start with a limited bank account. Okay, you can just deposit money and take out money for small services, and then we'll do your due diligence due to time. So, but especially that part, I would definitely change it. I would create a banking union somehow for big spaces. That would make my
Awesome. Yeah,
life.
I think we did meet someone back in London a year back, and he was trying to actually solve it primarily for the students, wherein they actually move out and actually study from different countries, have a huge hassle to open banks, and when they move from one country to another, either for studies or even, for example, for any kind of internship or some kind of exchange programs. And I think that's one of the. So I recall the conversation I had with him during that day.
Imagine now the remote work. So now if you go and you want to do some work in some different countries, so if you go to India to Canada, for example, imagine that you want to
Right.
work there for a year with those special visas. Then you probably
Right.
they'll tell you like, I'm sorry, you're just in a hotel or just in a rented house. We have to pay
Mm-hmm.
you back to India, not here. Although you would have to still use the money and your daily lives there. And this is probably one of the challenges that we don't talk too much, but digital nomads and digital work, it's all nice and well and doing remote work, but if you have those hurdles, it actually starts to become a little bit more different. Although companies like Revolut and others are actually trying to make that thing a little bit more easier, but it's still a big hurdle for everyone, as you said. I agree.
Absolutely. Bruno, I think we're done. And there's a last little question which I'll ask you is primarily for something that viewers would actually, how do they actually learn a lot but about a domain that you really like, that's fintech, or anything that you recommend in terms of books, podcasts, which everyone can go back and listen to?
Yeah, so, well, apart from myself, guys, I'm an online influencer. Of course, I have to do some publicity to myself. So feel free to connect, as I said in the beginning, and I'm always open to discuss it. I like the Breaking Banks podcast. It's very interesting, made by top industry influencers and experts. And apart from that, I would definitely say if you're a professional in this area, if you do have some time, do take the time to see what's published by the big central regulators from the big economical areas in the European Union, in US. I know sometimes it seems a little bit too serious, and the publications seem a little bit too serious, but most of the times that's where the big next challenges that you can solve for your company. So I would definitely advise to see the European Union publications, and Breaking Banks in terms of podcasts, and don't well and reach out for friends and colleagues, of course.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Bruno, for joining us. I think there are two major takeaways for us, which I would reiterate is primarily how it's important for banks to become agile in order to be so-called digitally significant in future. The second definitely is becoming cost effective. You mentioned about a great example of how they are ready to serve thousands of customers with a very limited number of employees. That's the way forward. And definitely is that they're going to create an ecosystem which will allow people to have products which are very specific to them. So I think these were the basic learnings that we had for today. And it was really great hearing from you. Thanks a lot for joining us for the day.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate it. I wish you all the best. Thank you for the energy, and have a great time. See you soon. Take
Awesome.
care.
I'll just quickly play a small little video. Here's another video, a small little reiteration of who Bruno is and how he's actually making an impact to the world. Thanks a lot, guys, for joining us. It's a bye from us. Hope you have a great weekend. And I think there are already comments, Bruno, by the way, that people are sending in connection requests to you. So hope you have some good communication from your own. Thanks a lot for joining us for the day.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.